I was saying, the best way to talk to people about abortion is not going to be using scripture. It's going to be using science. There are portions of apologetics where we go outside of the bounds of theology and we go into natural law and science. So what I'm going to be talking to you guys about today is called human embryology. Okay? And yes, this is going to be a little bit of the birds and the bees. Get over it. So human embryology is the study of the development of fertilization to birth. Okay? So everything in between. There are 4 stages when it comes in between fertilization and birth, and that is the zygote, the embryo, the fetus, and a newborn. By the 8-week mark, you have a fetus. Okay? So that's basically by the time that, so that's 2.5 months. 2 months, 2.5 months. So that's pretty quick. So just to kind of give you guys an outline of what's going on, this is where I pull out this right here. Back whenever I was in college, I was in a class called Human Embryology. And we had a little baby. We had a baby.
Aww.
The entire class, we had a baby, and as we went through the class, we kind of like fast-forwarded through the process of like of a baby growing. His name was Joseph Alexander Skywalker.
Yeah.
That's the type of people that I went to college with. Good. Obviously, day 0, the baby the egg has just been fertilized. By 2 weeks, a pregnancy test can start to work, and an embryo is 2 layers of cells. This is also when implantation happens, and the placenta begins to develop. At 3 weeks, you have the germ layers beginning to form. You have the rudimentary portions of the brain, and you also get your first heartbeat at 3 weeks. There's a week after a pregnancy test might work. By week 5, you already have arms and legs. The brain is further developing. You have a liver, the early pieces of the eyes, the kidneys. At 6 weeks, there are teeth, movement, brain waves. 8 weeks, there are eyelids. You actually start to hiccup at 8 weeks. Yeah, at 8 weeks old, you start to get hiccups. At 10 weeks, at 10 weeks is when the embryo is considered a fetus. It is also when you start to get fingernails. At 10 weeks, so about 2.5 months. 11 weeks, you have a nose and lips. At 13 weeks, the most of the body is beginning to be sensitive to touch. So this is first trimester, literally around the end of the first trimester. 14 weeks, you have toenails. You have limb movements. Limb movements become coordinated, so you actually know that you're moving your limbs. At 16 weeks, your eyes move to the front of your face. That's literally what I have in the notes here. Eyes move to the front of your face. So it's like as your skull forms, your eyes move to the front as opposed to. 17 weeks. At 17 weeks, you begin to think. At 17 weeks, your cerebral cortex forms. So you actually begin to have thought. At 19 weeks, you begin to get hair. 21 weeks, the fetus can possibly survive birth. This is the earliest that a fetus can survive birth. And at 22 weeks, you get blink startle responses. So kind of like you poke a belly and the baby will move. Yeah, they do a shimmy. So that's just 22 weeks of a 9-month process. Okay. This is what we're studying today. Is that. But the most important part of all of that is basically the fertilization process. Like I said, birds and bees. So I'm gonna move backwards here.
The birds and the bees are like two different things. I don't understand that.
I'm not going to explain.
Ask him parents.
I mean, I know what it means.
I know.
It makes no sense to me.
Ask him parents.
Mommy, Daddy, what are the birds and the bees? What are they doing?
No way, I just
Okay, guys, let's bring it back. No, it's okay. Okay. Cutting off conversations, bringing it back. So now I'm going to go through the process from ground zero, is literally what I called it, which is going to be the moment where the sperm and the egg meet, called the fusion of plasma membranes. It's a scientific term for it. All the way up to about the week mark. I'm going to get this out of the way so that all the immature men in the room can laugh. The 1 week mark is called cleavage. Like I said, all the immature men are going to laugh. So you have the fusion of the plasma membranes. This is when they first meet. You then have the creation of the ovum. This is the cell where the sperm and the egg basically share a singular cell. Everything that's inside the egg or inside the sperm, they're shared within a single cell. And this is when the first time that you actually have all of the DNA of a normal cell in the same place. They're separate, but it's all in the same place. And that happens about 30 minutes after ground zero. Then between 6 to 8 hours, the formulation of the pronuclei happens, which is basically two different nucleuses in the cell. And the DNA begins to organize. About between 8 and 10 hours, the DNA is replicating. It goes through the transcription process. I'm not a biology major, so I'm not going to get into that. You guys probably already go through all of that already. And that happens between 8 to 10 hours after the egg and the sperm meet. Then you have what's called syngamy at approximately 12 hours. This is where the pronuclei begins to break down and it starts to form into one nucleus. Nucleus. Thank you. And this is when the DNA begins to mix. And then out of that is going on up to about the 1 week mark where cleavage happens, and this is where so during this time period the cell is replicating but not growing. So basically it's in little bits but staying the same size until implantation happens, which is going to be a ovarian wall. So basically up to this point the cell is multiplying but not growing until it gets the nutrients from the mom. So if implantation takes place between 8 and 10 days. Okay. So now that we have kind of that general outline, I know in your biology classes you guys may have heard some of this, but I doubt that it ever went into this much detail about the actual process. So now that we have that, the next thing that we have to decide is really the big question when it comes to the abortion argument. When does life begin? So if we're looking at this scientifically, we follow. I skipped ahead. There are 7 signs of life. Okay, there are 7 things that scientists all agree mark the beginning of a new life. Okay, order. Okay, there's an order to it. It is not in chaos. Which I think that we can all say that in a embryo, or in a zygote, there is order. Yes.
Aren't cells already considered living things?
Ish. I'm getting there. Because technically, no, by themselves they're not. Because of one in particular, one of these. So is it sensitive or does it respond to stimuli? Literally, this entire thing is happening because of stimuli. So yes. Can it reproduce? Like I already said, that is literally what this cell is doing. Can it grow and develop? This is why a singular cell is not considered living, is because it does not have the ability to grow and develop by just as a single cell. Does that make sense? So an organism is considered living, but a singular cell would not be. So does it have the ability to grow and develop? That is literally what it's doing. Does it have homeostasis? Basically, does it have the appropriate conditions for life? Yes. In fact, it is in a perfect situation for it to live. Regulation. So is it going crazy with growing, or is it doing it at a steady rate? Which, yes, it is doing. And then finally, does it process energy? Yes, because energy is necessary for growth. Okay? So we needed to kind of go back through that whole set, like what was going on, in order to truly understand what was those 7 spots. One of my favorite little if someone's like, wow, like someone asks me a question about abortion and I just have 2 minutes to give them the quick answer, I always pull out the fact that the Carnegie stages, which is what is universally accepted by scientists as the stages of life, the Carnegie stages state that at the single cell, so in fertilization, at that single cell, so as soon as it becomes a singular cell, that is when life begins. That's what the Carnegie stages say. So literally, scientists all over the world universally accept the fact that life begins at conception. So that's the long answer for how. Yes.
I remember at the March for Life, I saw something that I'm pretty sure like everybody's heard this. It's like, why is abortion not considered murder? If you can kill a pregnant woman, it's considered a double homicide.
Yes.
That's
That is, yeah. Oh,
crazy.
I'm going through the science side of this. There is a whole legal side of this as well. Because like if you hit a pregnant woman with a car and you kill her, it's considered a double homicide. All of that stuff.
Yeah.
So that's the legal side of it. I found that is more often pulls people away. They'll just be like, yeah, well, I just don't agree with that law. And then you're kind of stuck. So the science, that's why I pull the science side of it, is because they're not going to be able to argue with the science. So they can argue with the science, but then they're arguing against natural law, and that's just not logical. All right. So some things, I know that everybody knows the Planned Parenthood abortion, the typical abortion stuff. There are two. They're called abortionogens out there. that a lot of people don't know are typically abortions. The first one is Plan B. Plan B basically gets rid of the uterine wall, making it so that the embryo cannot attach, thus killing the baby. The other one is birth control. Not all birth controls. I will state this. This is not all birth controls. But there are birth controls out there that the way that they work is they do that same thing. They get rid of the uterine wall, convincing your body that it's already pregnant. So then if the egg is fertilized, then if you have that zygote, that embryo, then it's not going to be able to implant, and thus it would be considered an abortion. So today during my research, I made the lovely decision to go onto the Planned Parenthood website and see what they tell us about how abortions are done. You guys ready for this? How abortion takes place according to the Planned Parenthood website. First, they examine your uterus. Then they put a speculum, which is a tool used to basically open you up, to see inside you. I'm just going to leave it there. They then inject a numbing medication into or near your cervix. They stretch the opening of your cervix with a series of dilating rods. Then they insert a thin tube through your cervix into your uterus. Then they use a small handheld suction device or suction machine to gently take the pregnancy tissue out of your uterus. Don't you love that wording? Pregnancy tissue. They may also use a small surgical tool to remove any tissue that's left in your uterus, or check to make sure your uterus is totally empty. So basically, they take a vacuum. Okay. Here's other things that they might do is this one's from WebMD. They might take some medication and inject it into your womb in order to stop the fetal heartbeat. That is, stop the fetal heartbeat is straight from WebMD. This is the process. Basically, they suction out your baby piece by piece, or they grab little pieces and rip off limbs. It's a lovely process. So, now that we have that and that lovely image in our head, I also love to give you guys some arguments for whatever we're going to be talking about. So here are some arguments for abortion. Keep in mind, some of these are ones that I've read and I was like, I can see where they're coming from for this argument. Other ones I'm like, wow, how stupid are you? I'm not going to clarify which ones for YouTube's sake. I don't want someone watching this and being like, he just called me dumb. Yeah, probably. Okay. For the first trimester, the fetus is fully reliant upon the mother, which is true. But that then comes down to, well, it's my body. And if it's fully reliant on me, then it's my choice. This is one that this is one that's actually really true, and that is thrown around by pro-lifers a lot. Adoption isn't, well, this is the argument. Adoption isn't a real option. I just saw this side of the room go, nope, you're right, it's not. Oh, I hate. There is as much as there's a grieving process that women go through, yes, there's actually a psychological disease that for people who have gone through abortions, because they basically go through immense amounts of depression. The same thing is true of women who give up their babies to adoption. They still go through that grieving process. The amount of space in orphanages and foster homes. The foster system itself is an argument against this. There's a lot of things about adoption that are not great, and by the look of it, these two over here will be happy to rant to you about it later.
Oh, of course.
So whenever it's like adoption is another option, well, a lot of times it's not. In fact, I was looking and I saw that there's approximately like 140,000 adoptions in a year, but like over 1 million abortions. So like, if those numbers don't line up. The fact that an abortion is safe, because it has a 0.5% chance of complications. Obviously, they'd be happy to rant to you about that too.
We can write about the whole process.
Another argument is in the situations of rape or incest. This is one of the ones that comes up a lot. And by the look of it, Luke will be happy to rant to you about that one.
Why is that, Luke?
As you guys can tell, there's some strong feelings about the topic in this room.
And children because of that, and raise them to be honorable people.
Yeah. There is, like I said before, the woman controlling her own body. In fact, one of the things that I read whenever I was doing research was that someone said that a woman, if they were to not be able to have an abortion, a woman would have less rights than a corpse. Because at least a corpse would be able to refuse being an organ donor. Another one. What about in the situations where it saves the mother's life? They'll be happy to rant to you about that one. Anyways. The fact that pregnancy complications are the 6th most common cause of death. The fact that it costs $30,000 to $37,000 to raise a child. I'm good.
Okay. I mean, if we didn't have...
Speaking of which, this is another argument that I've found. Having sex isn't a choice to get pregnant.
Oh my gosh.
I have actually literally had people give me that argument before, and I'm like, do you need to know how babies are made? The emotional toll of having a child. Let's be real. Children can be traumatic. What about? Hey, you two. Are you ready for this one? Just wait. Disabilities.
Oh!
My mom's a special ed teacher that hits home for me.
Like I said, making sure that the child can have proper care and love. Like, what if you aren't able to provide that? Here's a fun one. 2/3 of pregnancies are aborted by nature. It is actually a true fact.
I don't get that one.
Basically, miscarriages.
That's different than abortion. Okay.
You
It's like,
okay, Vivi.
That is so basically, for those of you who are confused, they're talking about everything between miscarriages to whenever whenever the zygote, whenever it just doesn't implant in the wall, in the uterine wall, all of that is considered to be an abortion. In this terminology, yes.
Someone, okay, I was like watching a video with it. So this lady, it's like, I'm pro-life, changed my mind. And this lady came and she's like, is it like abortion like C-section? And everybody, the guy was like, excuse me, maybe we need to be educated. Like,
Get learned. All right.
Even I was like,
Hold on, I've only got one more. Okay. This one, you guys know me. I always save the best for last.
Yeah.
David.
This is for those of you who use the law argument, because I do keep. Remember, I like to make sure I have trump cards for everything you guys throw at me. Did you guys know that the United Nations considers pregnancy torture?
are you serious?
What?
It is a form of torture.
Yeah.
What the heck?
This. Sorry. Let me rephrase that. Involuntary pregnancy. Not just.
Got it.
I mean, I'm sure that they would consider all pregnancies as using that terminology. I'm guessing with that terminology, they would consider it to be voluntary torture, I guess. Keep in mind, this is information that I gathered 2 years ago, a year ago, 2 years ago. I don't know if that's changed, but know that at least at one point in time, the United Nations did consider pregnancy as a form of torture.
Oh, I
So,
Where are the United
here, have you? There is everything that goes on during the pregnancy.
It's a blessing.
I want to talk to her when she's pregnant. Just